All right, all right. And we are live. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are listening in from. I am here with the illustrious Pat Waters again. Love, love, love being able to work with Pat. I feel like we go way back at this point.
Yeah, we do.
Oh
Happy
gosh. Well,
Monday, everyone.
yes, yes. While we are just kind of getting connected, why don't you, if you're listening in, put into the comments where you're listening from and maybe what is your role or connection to DEI, if you have one. If you're just listening in, if you're interested, that's great. But if you have a role in DEI, we'd love to know that as well. Because today we are talking about the state of DEI in today's workforce. And I'm going to add the B, DEIB, because I know that that is Pat's focus area and one of her courses. So before I get too ahead of myself, let me introduce myself. I am Stacey Gordon. I am the founder and principal consultant at Rework Work, and I'm a LinkedIn instructor. I have been a LinkedIn instructor for, oh gosh, I think it's 6 years now. I have a couple of different courses on the LinkedIn Learning platform, one of which is the Unconscious Bias course, which was the number one most watched course for 2021. And along with that, there's some others that virtual recruiting, diversity recruiting, etc. So excited to be here with Pat, and I'm going to let Pat introduce herself as well.
Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Excited to be here. Hi, I'm Pat Waters. I'm also a LinkedIn instructor. I'm privileged to get to do that. I think, Stacey, I've been doing courses as long as you have, funny enough. So I've talked about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, employee experience, just leading through challenging times. So I'm excited to be here. All I want to do is continue the conversation, continue to learn, copy shamelessly. So all of you listening in, if you have great ideas, Stacey and I are just going to eat them up. All right. We're going to share our thoughts. We want you to ask us questions. We want to engage with you. I leverage these LinkedIn Live events to learn and to share, basically, and to spend time with some great people like Stacey. So I'm excited to be here. And currently, I'm the head of HR for UKG, get the privilege of sitting on a couple of boards, and pretty much spend time with my family and on the beach. That's how I spend my life.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, and I thank you everyone for putting your info into the chat. It is just coming in so fast I can barely keep up. I was going to read out a few names, but now I feel like if I do that, I will be doing that all morning. So I'm just going to say hi to everyone. I'm seeing people from Charlottesville and from the UK and New York and Sacramento and Rochester. So
Canada. U-Crewers on. Thank you, U-Crewers, for joining us this morning.
Yes, wonderful group. So as Pat said, please, if you have questions, drop them into the chat. We would be happy. We do, of course, have a few things we're going to talk about, but if you've got a question that seems more interesting than what we were going to say, we will definitely answer it.
Yes.
But we'll sort of kick it off with the question of the day, right? Which is, what is the state of DEI in today's workforce? And Pat and I had some thoughts about that. We were chatting and we said, wow, I mean, there's a lot that's going on. And I think from my perspective, the state of the workforce right now, state of DEI, is there's two ends of the spectrum. There's kind of the individuals who they get it, they see this, they want to move forward, they don't understand why we're not moving faster. And then we've got the individuals who are still kind of like, what? Why are we still talking about this? And I feel like that gap, that disconnect is widening. It's kind of a divide between that. So that's kind of where I'm seeing things as a practitioner, just based upon the prospective clients and the current clients that I'm working with, and some of the things, I have had the opportunity to do some focus groups with employees, and we're really getting some interesting feedback.
I bet. I see the similar gaps. Stacey and I were riffing on that earlier. I think partly what I'm finding, and there was a question about how do you even start a program. I think part of it is some organizations, Stacey, where I see it, they set it aside. It's like, let's have a D&I team. Let's have folks that worry about this all day long, and the rest of us will do our day jobs. right? What a miss. Like DE&I and B have to be in the employee journey from start to scratch. It's got to be in our decision making. It's got to be in how we show up every day as leaders, as employees. It's got to be who we are culturally in the organization. So it shouldn't be, yes, I need guides. Yes, I need subject matter experts. But I think part of the gap is that we think it's someone else's worry, not mine. And it slows us down.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think just to piggyback off that for a moment, I think there is this place where we really are not looking inward at what we could be doing, and it's very easy to kind of sit in judgment of others and say, well, shake our fingers and say, well, look at this person, they're not, and they haven't, and why won't they? But sometimes we really have to hold a mirror up and ask ourselves, well, what are we doing, right? How are we helping? And so I think that is a good place to start for people, right? Is to look. One of the consultants I work with always says, "Look in the mirror and not so much in the window." Right?
Steal that quote. I like that. That's true.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Stacey,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I know there's gaps, right? But there's also some fatigue. You and I were talking about that as well. Like the conversations have shifted. In 2020, we know it was like top of mind, and employers and employees were discussing it. And now it's shifted in tone. It's shifted in its volume, if you will, of how loud we talk about it, how often we talk about it. And we talked a little bit about ESG and how this kind of ties together and or complicates the conversation. You want to discuss a little bit of what you see on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for the larger organizations, right, where ESG is something that they really have to focus in on. And half the time, I say ESG so much I forget what it stands for. But it's environmental. It's the
Societal.
S, and then
Societal.
governance.
Yeah. Social
Yes,
governance.
social. So, I mean, when you think about this, and people might say, "Oh, you should know what ESG is." Well, many people on here may not know, and I hear it as another one of those buzzwords, and I feel like it is. Yeah, I'm just going to say it right. I feel like it's a cop out because I feel like that's the place where people can dig in and go, yes, let's focus there. Because, if you want to do supplier diversity, right, it will fall in there. And so, again, it's another easy place to say, well, we'll just make sure that more suppliers are submitting to our portal. Right. And as long as we have more people in there who are underrepresented, then we've done our job. Right. And it doesn't require you to really do anything different. It doesn't require you to do all that much. And so it's an easy lift. And not to say that DEIB has to be a difficult lift or something that is so hard. But I do think that if we want different outcomes, we have to do things differently. And there are too many people who will call me and say, Stacey, we really don't want to change anything, but we need you to come in and, make it good, right? Make everyone sort of understand what DEI is. And I'm like, well, how do you expect me to do that when you don't actually want to change your practices? You don't want to change your policies. You have no desire to change your procedures, but yet you're going to expect something different. Like, I'm just like, why are you hiring me?
That's true. But I also think for those organizations that have board of directors, right? If you're a public company, and those of you in the chat, if you're in a public company, the part of the remit from either the comp committee is turning into human capital committee or the board is the CSG, like ISS, and you have, outside pressure, like what is your ESG charter? How are you going to do it? So if you're a talent leader, like don't let it obfuscate the work that we have to do. Leverage that as the entree into that conversation with the board about DEI and B. Like, what are those metrics? How do you care? What are your goals? Like, take advantage of the window and the mirror. I think on that one, like try to open up the door, the window, get in there and have that conversation, and don't let it become the easier conversation of ESG. Really get into it is where I'd go.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I talked to a lot of people who are having this conversation, and their struggle is that the people who really value DEI and see the importance of it don't have the connection or the ability to really talk to the board. And so the people who can talk to the board are the executive leaders. And so the executive leaders are in this place where they are seeing it as like, this is another thing we have to do to make sure that we placate our shareholders and we keep our board happy. And the number of times that I hear people say, well, we're just going to do this little thing over here, right? So that we can check this box and we can show that we've done it because it was on our list of things that we had to do. It was on our priority list. And we're getting really close to the end of our budget year and we haven't done it yet. So we've got to do something. And if you're approaching it from that outlook, you've got to realize that that's problematic, right? You've waited till the absolute last minute, and now you're trying to do something, anything that will at least look like you have followed the mandate that your board has required for you.
That's so funny. I was talking to John Rice. I don't know if you know who John Rice is. He's the CEO founder of MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And he's just a phenomenal leader. And he focuses a lot on getting minorities, nurtured through school, through education to work all the way up to the C-suite. And he's just this amazing human being. So I was chatting with him last week and he talked about what you just said, Stacey. He called it random acts of diversity. So you can have random acts of diversity that don't have the systemic or systems thinking around it. Like, how do you actually shift the environment, the policy, the practices, and make it last beyond a person? And if you don't, then you're going to have these random last minute acts of diversity, check a box. And so I don't want random acts. I actually want it embedded in what we do and how we do it. So in terms of the fatigue, like talking through this, what are your tips and tricks to energize the chief diversity officers and the leaders that passionately care, the allies that care about this topic? What's your wisdom to keep us in the game and like charging forward?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that you're not alone. One of the things I also see is that so many individuals think they're out on a limb by themselves. Mm-hmm. And so they don't want to speak up. The number of times they'll say to me, Stacey, I don't want to have to be the lone person always bringing up this topic or always, advocating without support. And so because I get to have these one-on-one conversations with individuals, I tell all of them, I'm like, I'm having, I can't, divulge confidentiality. And I'm like, I'm having similar conversations with lots of other people. I need you to understand you are not alone, right? So you might think you're alone, but you're not, right? It's time to coalesce, right? To create a coalition and really look at who else is out there, right? Find the other people in the choir that we're preaching to and bring them together, because then you can pull people in rather than push, right? And I think that's the thing that is helpful, is that you really are not alone. I know many of you are out there just drained and tired of pushing this boulder up a hill by yourself. But it is a perception, and there are many, many more people who really want to see change. I think the number is something like 75% of employees actually want to see this change, right? So that means that 3 out of 4 of you want to work towards this. The problem is there isn't enough communication about it.
Yeah, and I think, and Natalie, you're right. I think she made a comment in the stream, diversity is a culture ad, right? Thinking about, and I tell my leaders, like, it makes us smarter. If I actually have any debate with my leaders, like the measure twice, cut once mindset, it's if you have diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives, diversity in its fullest sense, then I'm going to slow my roll because I want to learn from your perspective, Stacey, because you walk this earth differently than I do. And I cannot copy what my pattern has been into your framework. And so I will do more research. I will think more deeply. I will ask more questions. My ears will be open. I won't assume an answer. And so as organizations, we have to do this work. If we want to be great in the world, if we want to serve our customers and they serve their customers, this is what we got to do. And that's why I think it belongs, like you would frame out a customer journey map, right? From attracting a customer, retaining that customer, net promoter scores, the whole shebang. You got to do the same thing for the employees. Attract them, right? Show that they're welcome. Show that they're going to not only survive, but thrive in your organization. And there's not one size fits all. that's the challenge. That's why you get fatigue. It's like, I cannot do one solution, Stacy, and call it a day. It's so thorny. And we were riffing earlier about, when organizations are changing how they come back into an office space. Some employees never left the office during COVID. Some are coming back into the office a few days a week. They're hybrid employees, they're remote employees. But there's this mindset that, employees that feel marginalized, don't feel safe in the workplace, don't want to come back into the brick and mortar. And they feel that it's not best for them. They do their best work not there. They like being on that chicklet, I call it, and they have the equal front row. They have the equal voice. Even the introverts like myself find my space through technology in some ways so I can breathe more. I don't lose as much energy. But Stacey, what are your points about that as companies are struggling and bringing some people, not 5 days a week, 9 to 5, but how do we change, not go back the way we work, but how do we go forward in a new way of working? Thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I have tons of thoughts around it because, like, again, I work with these leaders, and I literally talked to a CEO about a month and a half ago, and in one breath, he said, "My employees need to come back to the office," and in the next breath, he said, "We're having trouble hiring," and I was like, I think those two statements might be related, but he is absolutely adamant that they must come back to work. And so I think it goes to this place where we have to have some flexibility. This is not, I talk a lot about leadership evolution, right? We're not, as humans, we're not static, right? We change, we ebb, we flow. And if you look back, right, it's easy to look backwards and see how much we have changed in the way that we work over time. And so if you consider that we're going to continue changing as we move forward, we're not going to stay static. And leaders who insist that we stay static need to realize that you're going to be a dinosaur, right? Kind of stomping your foot by yourself, because you're going to get left in the dust as work continues to evolve. And so we have to realize that there's a number of things at play, right? We've got, like you said, introverts, underrepresented minorities who they're tired of the microaggressions, right? It's easier to be in my house and not have to deal with these things that go on in the workplace. And so in order to get people back into work, because we are in a place where we know that when we collaborate, when we connect, right, we're going to be more creative. But if we're not connecting on a real level, if you're not connecting because you see me as a Black woman and actually want to connect with me authentically, it doesn't make any sense for me to come in just to do lip service and say we connected, knowing full and well that my team doesn't actually include me in that, right?
That's interesting. So I think we have to do the real work. What I love about now is that we have a challenge in front of us. I love a problem. I love touching the elephant and figuring out what's the cause. What do we do? How do we define it? What does great look like? And then make experiments. I believe that we should stop saying transformation leaders. We should think about agile leaders and be willing to try things out and throw them away if they don't work, to listen to our employees, to create a community that's human centric, right? I want to know who I work with, not what they do per se. I want to know who you are. This leader last week also shared with me that in one of his first meetings with new hires, he asks the new hire, what's the most important thing outside of work for you these days? And they tell him, they start telling him, right? A little bit. They start the trust dance. And it's like, my family, I'm a new mom. I love skiing. I'm learning to play the ukulele, whatever that thing is. And so when that employee tells that manager that I have my new ukulele class, or, I have a trouble with my child, or whatever the thing is, the empathy and understanding will be there. So I think teaching a way to be more human centric at work, teaching that belonging conversation, you know how important that is to me, Stacey. We can do that today. It's random acts of belonging. I believe in those, like welcome the human. But we do have a question for us. Stacey is on the stream from Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. How to address the C-suite saying If, quote, they had a problem, they should say something. These employees do not feel safe saying something or asking. So how do you give voice to the they?
Oh my goodness. Literally just did this last week with a group, and we had this exact conversation, right? We're talking about this all the time, around this idea that it's so it's very easy for a privileged person to say, well, just speak up and just say it, right? Because you have the privilege, you've always done it. You don't know what it's like to not speak up. And so one of the women in the group actually said, well, I would like to speak up. And I've had men say to me, well, why didn't you just say something? And she's like, because I don't feel comfortable. She's like, this is the first time I'm actually saying in this group, right? I don't feel comfortable speaking up because I believe that my career could be in jeopardy. Now, that might sound really dire to some people, but what that means is not that she's going to be fired tomorrow, but it means that maybe somebody isn't going to consider her, right, for a raise or a promotion, or not even as big as that, like just to get onto a team where she then might be able to do well and then be considered for a raise or a promotion, right? So, or I don't want to work with that person because, I don't like their tone, right? We get a lot of tone policing when it comes to women. So we really have to be in a place where psychological safety is key. And that requires, going back to what you said, Pat, right, about this trust dance. We have to be able to trust one another and understand that so that I can then speak up and say, maybe I actually don't feel safe to say this. Maybe I can pull you aside and say it, right? There's so many different ways that we have to be able to start to create trust. Without trust, none of this stuff works.
None of it. When I was the head of HR at LinkedIn with my team, we were noodling on this, and I'm trying to think through how do I get the missing voices to be shared, right? What's missing, and tips and tricks. And I would talk to coaches about this, and so they would, simple tools like devil's advocate, just go around the room. What could break, right? Just everyone can say what they can break, and so everyone's critiquing or having constructive thought about something, and I don't feel like I'm being personally offended by something. Someone else said, well, I don't like brainstorming. It freaks me out. So can I, just sit here, write my notes, and can we do it on a Teams chat? Can we do it on whiteboards with stickies? Like, that's why I say agile leadership is so important. I think it's like old school situational leadership. It's like, how do you don't lean on your own preference of leading and communicating, because you may have privilege. How do you ensure that others feel safe? And it takes trial and error. It takes the humanity. It takes time to build that psychological safety and teach them the yes and not, but that's wrong, right? Like, you can shut me down and I have imposter syndrome. And so I'll just start leaning back. My body language will tell you when I disengage really quick. I'm terrible at poker. Like, I've lost this one. So I think at work, we've got to, God, we can't give up, Stacy. We gotta
Yeah.
keep doing it. Gotta keep
I think I think there's some humility that is needed as leaders as well, right? We've got to be able to put the ego aside, and so that when somebody does say, ouch, that hurt, or this is a problem, or excuse me, I'm seeing, this thing, right? And I want to be able to speak up, that we can take that in and say thank you for bringing that to my attention, right? Thank you for letting me know, because that makes me a better leader, because now I know how to lead better, because I have a better understanding of what is going on in my team, in my workplace, in my function, in my department, right? And without that, you can't possibly consider yourself a good leader if people aren't coming to you and giving you feedback, if they're not able to walk in the door and provide you with real, honest, authentic, right, feedback and input. If that's not happening, you really do have to look in the mirror and go, wow, maybe I need to change up my style. And like you said, it's that flexibility of realizing that maybe I'm not going to spring this topic on people in a meeting. Maybe I'm going to send this out in advance. I'll actually have an agenda and let people know we're going to be discussing this, and I'm going to expect your input on this particular point. So those who need time to process can think about it and actually come with their best ideas. And then those ideas might come by email. through Slack, on a note card if you're in person, right? On a Padlet or a virtual whiteboard, right? Or they might actually just raise their hand and speak up because they're an extrovert like me, right? Like,
Yeah, I'll be the quiet one. I'll be the quiet one. But I think you're nailing it. I know we're getting close to the bottom of the time together, but I remember distinctly my one lesson when I was working with Jeff Weiner, and he's such an extrovert. He loved brainstorming, and as an introvert, I'd start to sweat in the staff meeting, like, oh no, he's going to ask everyone their opinion. I'm not ready. I don't have all my data. I haven't, processed it all. I have too many voices in my head. And as he's going around the room, I'm counting down when my turn is, and I'm literally flustered. And so finally, I was like, Waters, what are you thinking? I'm like, I hate brainstorming. Stop. He was like, no, I really want your opinion. And I'm like, all right, I get it. I'm at the table. He needs to see where we stand. And so I started thinking through how my voice was going to be shared. And I said, all right, from a scale of 1 to 10, I'm still processing. This is like a 5, Jeff, like in processing time. Maybe tomorrow I'll have like an 8. Like I'll have more data. I'll figure out exactly where I stand. And so I gave him a barometer about where I was sitting on a topic, and that kind of helped him continue the flow. And it made me more comfortable in sharing something that I thought was imperfect, that it wasn't fully baked. And so I go back to that agility. So as we close this half hour, I think my one tip is be agile, right? Experiment, listen, be human centric, and then if you're in a talent space, craft your journey intentionally. So you build in D&I in those decision points, slow our roll so we're more cognizant of what's happening in the world, and be thoughtful and be willing to change, because it's not one size fits all.
Absolutely. I see a couple of questions. So I want to kind of, if you've got a second, I think, Katie says, how do you navigate meetings with a leader whose ego informs their decision making? And I think when leaders' egos inform their decision making, you have to look at what is your relationship to that leader, and who has a relationship with that leader. Because sometimes what needs to happen is prior to the meeting, this is why having an agenda, and so you know what is going to be talked about, is great, right? Because prior to that meeting, I go back to, and this will be my one tip, is form a coalition. I talked to a group of leaders who were very frustrated with their executive leader. And I said to them, you are all on the same page. He's not, but he can't fire you all. So what you need to do is come with data, and you need to come with a confirmed sort of coalition that says, hey, we have come to the conclusion that we would like to try this. And here's our data for it, and here's what we'd like to do. And you've got to stand firm, right, and be a committed group, because then you can start to make change. And I think it's the same thing with something like that. You've got to be able to show this leader that, hey, I understand you have this point of view, but all of us here actually have a slightly different point of view, and we'd really appreciate it if you could at least take it into consideration, right? And start that conversation. So I think that is really important, because we get that a lot. Tips for improving appetite on DEI. I think pull, right? Make people interested. Do things that are happening in the workplace where people go, I might actually want to join that. I want to learn more. Make people curious, right? We don't need to do the hard sell. I think, again, 75% of people actually want this in the workplace. So it's not a hard sell. It's about providing opportunities for people to actually participate, and for everyone to participate, not just a specific group, right? So I could go on about this for days and days and days. I have like thoughts on thoughts on thoughts about this, but I think all of these are really great questions. I'm going to try to grab some of them, and we'll be doing some more DEI town halls. So I would say follow Pat, follow myself on LinkedIn. If you have not watched our courses as yet, this is a great time. If you go to LinkedIn Learning, is it linkedin.com/learning?
Yes.
And you can look us up, and you'll be able to find our courses, because that'll help you. And actually, I have a really quick, this will help too. I just did a short link, reworkwork.com/courses, and that will put you into all of the different courses that I have available. So again, Thank you, Pat. I appreciate you spending time with me today. I appreciate everyone who was here today. If we did not get your question answered, let's definitely bring it up to the next DEI town hall. And again, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And then we'll check out the chat and maybe we'll answer online as well. So thank you for spending your day with us. Stacy, it's always wonderful chatting with you, and especially on a topic that's so important to do and it makes the world better. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you all.